the transport ship Aurora's Reach drifted through the quiet edges of the Andromeda research zone. Its corridors were filled with the soft hum of engines and the scent of metal and recycled air. On board were engineers, scientists, and officers from many different species, all chosen for their intelligence and skill. Among them sat a young alien girl named Rhaenyra, and beside her sat a human engineer named Elias Ward. But that was not how it began. When Rhaenyra first arrived on the ship, she had felt the weight of silence. Her species, the Valarans, were known for their strange blue skin, delicate bone structure, and a voice that echoed softly when they spoke. They were peaceful and artistic, not known for technical skill. The Valarans once had a strong place in the galaxy, but after a failed alliance years ago, most species treated them as unreliable. Rhaenyra joined the mission hoping to change that, hoping to show that her kind could still contribute. But as soon as she stepped onto Aurora's Reach, she realized how difficult that would be. At the first assembly, she stood among a sea of uniforms. The tall Kareth warriors whispered to each other. The sleek Aelith scientists looked at her with quiet judgment, and even the robotic units scanned her with what felt like curiosity mixed with pity. No one came near her. When she found her assigned workstation in the engineering deck, she saw that all the other seats were already taken, except the one at the far corner, marked with her name. The others kept their distance as if an invisible wall surrounded her. Every day she came, adjusted her tools, and worked silently. Her long fingers moved gracefully over the controls, but she could feel the eyes of others on her back. They never spoke cruel words, but their silence was louder than any insult. She often wondered if it was her people's reputation, or just her own nervousness that made them stay away. Then one morning, something changed. The ship's doors hissed open, and a tall man with short brown hair and tired eyes walked into the engineering room. His uniform was simple, stained with traces of engine grease. His name tag read Elias Ward, Chief Mechanical Engineer, Human Division. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community. Some aliens considered them reckless, emotional, and unpredictable, but also strangely brave. Elias carried that mix in his face, a calm look that hid storms behind it. He entered quietly, nodded to the room, and looked for an empty seat. There was only one, next to Rhaenyra. A few of the others glanced at him, expecting he would avoid that spot like everyone else. But without hesitation, Elias walked straight toward it. He set his toolbox down, gave her a small nod, and sat beside her as if nothing was strange about it. Rhaenyra's heart gave a small jump. She tried not to stare, but it was the first time anyone had chosen that seat. She turned slightly, unsure if she should greet him. "You can use this console if you like," she said softly. Her voice had that gentle echo that made some people uncomfortable. "Thanks," Elias replied, tapping the controls. "But it looks like it's yours. I'll take the auxiliary board instead." He gave her a brief smile, tired but kind. "I'm Elias." She blinked, surprised that he spoke so casually to her. "Rhaenyra," she said quietly. "Velaron Division 3. "Good to meet you, Rhaenyra," he said, and then began unpacking his tools. For a while they worked in silence. The others in the room exchanged glances. Kareth muttered something under his breath about humans being too friendly. But Elias didn't care. He checked power couplings, adjusted pressure valves, and asked Rhaenyra for a diagnostic reading as if they had always been teammates. She hesitated before answering. "Diagnostic panel shows stable flow, except for line 4. It's slightly off balance." He leaned closer to the screen. "You've got a sharp eye," he said. "Most wouldn't notice a deviation that small." Rhaenyra felt a warmth in her chest. It had been weeks since anyone had complimented her work. "Thank you," she whispered. Over the next few days, Elias continued to sit beside her. They didn't talk much, but the silence between them felt different from before. It wasn't cold. It was a silence filled with quiet understanding. He sometimes asked her for readings or handed her tools, and she found herself looking forward to those small moments. One day, while they were working on the plasma regulator, the unit suddenly sparked and released a small burst of energy. Most of the engineers stepped back in alarm. Rhaenyra instinctively shielded her face, but Elias grabbed a thermal barrier and covered the exposed node. The spark died instantly. "Power surge from the secondary grid," Elias muttered, checking the readings. "We'll need to replace the conductor." Rhaenyra nodded, her hands trembling slightly. It happened because of a misaligned stabilizer. I thought I fixed it. He looked at her with a calm expression. It's okay. Happens to everyone. No harm done. But when she glanced around, she could see the other crew members whispering again, shaking their heads. She heard one say softly, "Valarans can't handle real tech work." The words hit her like ice. Her throat tightened, but she said nothing. Elias heard it too. He turned his head slowly toward the whispering group. "That's funny," he said, his tone cool. "Because she just spotted the fault before the sensors did. Maybe you should learn from her instead of talking." The room went quiet. No one replied. The others turned back to their work, pretending not to hear. Rhaenyra stared at Elias, stunned. No one had ever defended her before. She wanted to say something, thank you maybe, but the words wouldn't come out. Later, when their shift ended, she followed him out into the hallway. The corridor lights glowed softly, reflecting off the polished metal. "You didn't have to say that," she said quietly. Elias shrugged. "Sure I did. You were right, they were wrong. Simple as that." She looked at him confused. "Most people avoid defending Valarans. It can make them unpopular," he chuckled. "I'm human. We've never been popular in this galaxy. Doesn't bother me much." Rhaenyra smiled faintly for the first time. "You are strange," she said. "Yeah," he said with a grin. "I've heard that before." In the following weeks, their quiet partnership grew into friendship. They started sharing lunch breaks, talking about Earth and Valara. Elias told her stories of Earth's oceans and storms, of old machines and cities that never slept. Rhaenyra listened with wonder. She told him about the Velaran seas, where light bent like silk and creatures sang across the currents. They were from different worlds, yet they both understood what it felt like to be underestimated. One night, as they worked late repairing a damaged hull section, Rhaenyra asked softly, "Why did you choose to sit next to me that day?" Elias was tightening a bolt when he paused. "Because everyone else was ignoring you," he said simply. "And that didn't sit right with me. You looked like you needed a teammate. I figured I could use one too." She looked down, touched by the simplicity of his answer. "Most people only see what others tell them to see," she said. "You looked anyway." He smiled faintly. "Humans tend to do that. Sometimes it gets us into trouble. But sometimes, it helps." From that night on, the engineering deck felt different. The others still kept their distance, but they watched Rhaenyra and Elias more closely. They saw how efficiently they worked together, how their systems ran smoother than any other teams. Bit by bit, respect began to replace the old whispers still. Rhaenyra never forgot how it began, with one human who saw her not as a symbol of failure, but as a person worth sitting beside. As the Aurora's reach continued its long journey through the stars, the bond between them quietly changed the atmosphere of the entire ship. It was something small, almost invisible, yet powerful enough to ripple through every corridor. Rhaenyra didn't know what lay ahead. She didn't know that soon, a crisis would come that would test them both, one that would decide not only their fates, but also the future of her entire species. But for now, as she sat beside Elias, feeling the steady hum of the ship and the quiet comfort of someone who finally treated her as equal, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. She felt seen, and for the first time since joining Aurora's Reach, she didn't feel alone. Weeks passed aboard Aurora's Reach. The ship traveled deeper into the unexplored belt of the Andromeda frontier, where only a few expeditions had ever gone. The crew had grown used to its rhythm, long work shifts, quiet meals, and endless stars outside their viewports. Yet something subtle had changed in the atmosphere since Elias Ward started sitting beside Rhaenyra. People spoke of it quietly, how the human and the Velaran worked in perfect coordination. Their section's reports were the most consistent, their repairs the fastest, and their error rate the lowest on the ship. Even those who once ignored Rhaenyra began to notice that she wasn't just another alien. She was becoming the most valuable engineer on the lower decks. But not everyone liked that change. One afternoon, Commander Drell, a tall, sharp-looking Alith officer, called for a performance review. All engineers gathered around the central console. Drell's golden eyes scanned the data. "Section 4 under Chief Engineer Elias Ward," he said. "Your energy grid efficiency increased by 12%. Good work. But there are concerns about your unorthodox methods." Elias folded his arms. "Unorthodox how?" Drell flicked his long fingers toward the screen. You modified the power cycle codes manually instead of following the Aelith standard automation process. That violates protocol, Elias spoke calmly. The Aelith process was creating voltage lag. We fixed it, Drell's voice was cool. Fixed, perhaps. But procedures exist for a reason. You should have reported before changing parameters. Before Elias could reply, Rhaenyra spoke softly. It was my decision, Commander. I noticed the lag first. I asked Elias to help me run the manual correction. The room went silent. Drell's golden eyes narrowed. You took responsibility for that? Yes, sir, she said, her voice steady. He studied her for a moment, then turned away. Very well. I'll allow it this time. But next time, report before acting. As Drell walked away, a few of the others whispered again. But this time, Rhaenyra didn't feel small or invisible. Elias gave her a quiet smile. You didn't have to take the blame. I didn't, she said. We share the work. We share the risk, he chuckled. Fair enough. Later, as the shift ended, they went to the ship's observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly outside the glass dome, glowing in colors too beautiful to name. Rhaenyra stood close to the window, her reflection merging with the stars. On my world, she said softly, we believed that every light in the sky was a soul finding its way home. Elias leaned on the railing beside her. That's a nice thought. She looked at him. And what do humans believe? He smiled faintly. That stars are suns. And if we keep reaching far enough, one day we'll visit every one of them. Rhaenyra tilted her head slightly. Humans, you always want to reach beyond what you see, even when the rest of the galaxy tells you not to. He laughed quietly. Yeah, that sounds about right. Their friendship had become the talk of the crew, not in cruel whispers this time, but in quiet curiosity. It was rare to see such understanding between species so different. Elias didn't care about rules of distance or hierarchy. He treated Rhaenyra as an equal. He asked her questions, listened to her answers, and shared ideas. Together they started improving ship systems that had been unstable for years. One evening they were assigned to the deep maintenance bay, a dark, echoing place full of heavy pipes and flickering lights. The ship's power core had begun producing irregular readings, and the captain wanted it checked immediately. Elias and Rhaenyra worked side by side, crawling through the narrow tunnels that led to the core chamber. It's quiet here, Rhaenyra whispered, her voice echoing softly through the metal, almost like the ship is sleeping. Yeah, Elias said, shining his lamp ahead. Let's hope it doesn't wake up angry. She laughed gently, the sound light and musical. For a moment he smiled, realizing how rare it was to hear her laugh, but the calm didn't last long. As they reached the power chamber, Elias noticed something odd. The core regulator panel was pulsing unevenly. Not just a technical fault, but something more erratic. Rhaenyra, check the flux output, he said. She tapped her wrist scanner. Her eyes widened. The regulator is drawing energy from the ship's reserve lines. That's not supposed to happen. Could be a fault in the backup generator, Elias said. Or, he stopped studying the readings again. Or someone tampered with it. They exchanged a worried glance. The idea of sabotage was not impossible. There were rival groups who disliked the human-led missions into Andromeda. If the power core was damaged, it could cripple the ship completely. Elias contacted the bridge. Engineering to command. We've got irregular flux behavior in the main regulator. Possible external interference. The captain's voice came through, calm but tense. Copy that, Engineer Ward. Secure the area. We're detecting strange energy signatures in nearby sectors. Rhaenyra's hands moved quickly over the control board. We can stabilize it temporarily, but the energy is building too fast. Elias nodded. Then we reroute it manually. They worked together in perfect sync. Rhaenyra adjusted the plasma relays while Elias redirected the coolant lines. Sweat beaded on his forehead and Rhaenyra's thin fingers trembled slightly under the pressure. But neither slowed down. The core's vibration grew louder, the blue light flashing dangerously bright. Elias gritted his teeth. Come on, come on. Finally, with one last switch, the energy levels dropped to normal. The humming steadied. The lights dimmed to their usual glow. They both exhaled in relief. Good work, Elias said, his voice tired but proud. Rhaenyra smiled faintly. We did it. But as they turned to leave, Elias noticed something on the floor. A small metallic shard near the control unit. He picked it up. It wasn't part of the ship's equipment. It had markings in an unknown language. "This doesn't belong here," he muttered. Rhaenyra looked at it carefully. "That's from a Kareth plasma converter, but why would one be here?" Elias frowned. "Someone's been accessing the core who shouldn't. They reported it to the captain, who ordered an investigation. But as word spread through the ship, suspicion began to divide the crew. Some whispered that the Valaran girl had access to systems no one else used. Others said it was the humans' fault. Humans always brought trouble. For the first time, the quiet alliance between Elias and Rhaenyra was tested. They felt the coldness return, the looks of doubt in the corridors. Even those who had started respecting them began to avoid eye contact. One evening, after another long day of questioning and suspicion, Rhaenyra sat alone in the mess hall. The lights were dim and her food was untouched. She stared at her hands, feeling that old loneliness returning, the same emptiness she had felt when she first boarded the ship. Then Elias walked in. He saw her sitting alone and came over carrying a tray of food. Without a word, he sat beside her again, the same seat he had chosen on the first day. She looked up, surprised. "You're not worried about being seen with me?" He smiled slightly. "If I cared about that, I wouldn't have sat here in the first place." She gave a weak laugh. "They think it was me." "I know," he said softly. "But it wasn't, and I'll prove it." She looked at him, her eyes tired. "Why do you trust me so easily?" "Because I've seen how you work," Elias said. "You don't cut corners. You care about this ship more than anyone. And because sometimes you just know when someone's good." Her throat tightened with emotion. "You're different, Elias," he shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe I just see clearer than the rest." The next day, Elias began digging through system logs, determined to find the truth. Rhaenyra helped him quietly. For hours, they traced access codes, rewrote command paths, and decrypted messages hidden in the ship's memory. Finally, they found it. A ghost signal routed from the Kareth Division's terminal, matching the timing of the power surge. Elias leaned back. "Got you?" Rhaenyra looked at the data, relief and fear mixing in her chest. "If we show this to the captain, it'll clear us, but it could start a conflict between species on board." Elias nodded slowly. "Then we show proof carefully. We make sure no one gets blamed wrongly. But the truth needs to come out." She looked at him, her voice soft but strong. "You really think one act of honesty can fix all this?" He smiled. "It's a start." That night, as Aurora's Reach continued its journey through the silent stars, Elias and Rhaenyra worked quietly in the glow of the consoles. Outside, the galaxy seemed endless, full of light, darkness, and unknowns. Inside the ship, two people from distant worlds were holding together something much greater than themselves. Trust. And neither of them knew that soon. This fragile bond would face its hardest test, one that would decide not only their friendship, but the survival of everyone aboard the ship. The days after the discovery were tense aboard Aurora's Reach. The atmosphere that once hummed with routine now felt heavy, as if everyone was waiting for something to break. The captain ordered a silent investigation into the strange signal that had caused the power surge, but rumors still spread faster than truth ever could. Some said the Valaran girl had created a backdoor in the system. Others whispered that the human engineer was covering for her. Elias and Rhaenyra tried to ignore it, focusing only on their work. They spoke little, yet their silence had a quiet strength. Each knew the other's thoughts without needing words. But behind that calm, both felt the pressure building, the need to prove themselves not just to the captain, but to the entire crew. Late one night, while most of the ship slept, Elias sat alone in the engineering deck, studying system logs again. The glow from the consoles painted his face in blue light. His eyes were tired, but he refused to rest. He knew the source of the sabotage had not been fully found. The logs had revealed only a piece of the puzzle. Someone was still trying to interfere with the ship's systems. Then the alarm sounded. A sharp, pulsing siren echoed through the corridors. Elias jumped up, his heart racing. The ship's intercom came alive. Warning. Energy core destabilizing. All engineering teams to main reactor immediately. He didn't even grab his toolkit, he just ran. When he reached the reactor room, the sight froze him for a moment. The core's containment field was flickering wildly, waves of blue light rippling through the air. Sparks danced across the control panels. Crew members were shouting, rushing to stabilize the systems. And in the middle of it all stood Rhaenyra, her hands flying over the console faster than anyone else's. "Rhaenyra," Elias shouted, pushing through the crowd. "What's happening?" She turned, her face pale under the glow. "It's a feedback loop. Someone's triggered the reserve energy grid to overload the main reactor. If we don't shut it down, it'll explode. Can you isolate it?" "I'm trying, but the system keeps resetting. It's being controlled remotely." Elias cursed under his breath and rushed to the secondary terminal. "Then we'll cut the feed from here. You hold the stabilizer. I'll handle the power cut." The captain's voice came through the intercom. "Engineering, you have 4 minutes before containment fails. Evacuate if you can't restore control." Elias didn't even look up. "We're not leaving," he muttered. Rhaenyra's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the field dampeners. Her echoing voice filled the chamber. "If the main conduit blows, we'll lose life support. The ship won't survive the blast." "Then we don't let it blow," Elias said firmly. The room felt hotter by the second. Panels sparked, alarms wailed, and the crew scrambled to keep up. But it was clear that most of them didn't understand the hybrid systems running the core, half human design, half alien tech. Only Elias and Rhaenyra truly knew how it worked. Suddenly, the floor shuddered beneath them. A surge of energy shot up the central conduit, making the walls glow bright blue. Rhaenyra gasped, shielding her eyes. "The energy's escaping containment." Elias looked at the readings. The reactor's magnetic field was collapsing. "We can't stop it from here," he said. "We'll have to go inside the containment chamber and reroute it manually." The others stared at him in disbelief. "That's suicide," one of them shouted. "The radiation levels will fry you." But Elias was already pulling on a protective suit. "Then it's a good thing I'm stubborn." He turned to Rhaenyra. "You stay here. If the stabilizer drops, you'll have to seal the chamber behind me." She shook her head quickly. "No, you can't do it alone. You'll need me to balance the flux manually." "Rhaenyra," she looked him straight in the eyes. "You didn't leave me when everyone else did. I won't leave you now." For a moment he wanted to argue, but the determination in her eyes stopped him. He nodded once. "All right, let's do this." Together they entered the containment chamber. The air shimmered with heat and energy, and the sound of the reactor filled their ears like thunder. Blue light surrounded them, pulsing from the massive core that sat in the center like a heart beating too fast. Elias moved to the conduit controls, while Rhaenyra positioned herself at the stabilizer column. "I'll reroute the surge through the auxiliary grid," he shouted over the noise. "When I say now, drop the energy level by 15%. She nodded, her glowing eyes fixed on the control crystals. "Ready!" He worked fast, sweat running down his face despite the suit. His fingers moved over the switches and wires with precision, every move a race against time. The core screamed louder as energy built up. "Now, Rhaenyra!" She slammed her hand down on the control pad. The light flickered, and for a moment it seemed to work, until a new surge hit them from below. The floor shook violently. Rhaenyra fell, hitting her shoulder hard. The stabilizer reading spiked red. "Rhaenyra!" Elias ran to her, helping her up. Her face was pale, her breath quick. "I'm fine," she whispered. "But the system's still unstable. There's another feedback path, hidden in the secondary relays." Elias's mind raced. Whoever sabotaged the ship had built layers into the code. "We can't shut it down from here. We'll have to override the central processor manually." He looked up at the reactor's core. The control node was at the top of the containment ring, a narrow platform bathed in dangerous energy. Without hesitation, Elias began to climb. The heat burned through his gloves, and the radiation alarm screamed in his helmet. But he kept going. Rhaenyra called after him, her voice trembling. "You'll get hurt!" He looked down at her with a faint smile. "Then you'd better make sure it's worth it." She didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but she focused on the controls, stabilizing what she could. Elias reached the top and ripped open the main console. Sparks flew out, cutting across his visor. He ignored the pain and began rerouting the lines manually, his fingers moving fast despite the shaking. "Rhaenyra," he shouted. "Now sink the dampeners to 50%. She obeyed instantly. "Done!" The light around them flared blindingly bright. The reactor roared like a storm. For a long, endless second, it felt like the whole ship was going to explode. And then, silence. The alarms went off one by one. The light dimmed. The vibration stopped. The core stabilized. Elias slumped against the railing, exhausted. "It's done," he breathed. Rhaenyra ran to him, helping him down from the platform. His suit was damaged, his face pale, but he was smiling weakly. The moment they stepped out of the chamber, the rest of the engineering crew cheered. The captain's voice came through the speakers, filled with relief. Containment restored. Excellent work, Ward and Rhaenyra. You've saved this ship. Rhaenyra looked at Elias, her voice barely a whisper. You did it. He shook his head. No, we did. Word of their heroism spread across the ship faster than any rumor before. The same crew members who once ignored her now greeted Rhaenyra with respect. The Kareth engineer who had whispered against her came to shake her hand. Even Commander Drell, usually cold and distant, stopped by their station. You proved yourself today, he said to Rhaenyra. And you, Human Ward. You proved that cooperation still has meaning. Elias just smiled tiredly. That's all we were trying to do. In the following days, repairs continued, but the atmosphere had completely changed. Where there had once been division, now there was teamwork. Species that had rarely spoken before worked side by side. The Aurora's reach had not only survived, it had become a symbol of unity. One evening, Rhaenyra and Elias sat again on the observation deck. The stars shimmered outside the glass, silent and endless. It's strange, Rhaenyra said softly. When I first came here, I thought this ship would break me. I never imagined it would change me instead. Elias looked at her, smiling faintly. You changed all of us, she tilted her head. Do you think the galaxy will ever stop judging by species? Maybe not, he said. But every time someone decides to take the seat next to someone different, it gets a little better. She smiled, remembering that first day, the sound of the chair beside her, the warmth of being seen. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For sitting down. Elias looked out at the stars, his voice calm. That's what humans do best. We show up when others don't. Outside the glass, a new star flared in the distance, bright, sharp, and beautiful. The Aurora's reach sailed toward it quietly, carrying a crew forever changed by two people who had chosen trust over fear. And somewhere deep in the silence of space, Rhaenyra realized something she would never forget. That kindness, once given, can echo louder than any voice, across any world.